Okay. Meeting is now being live streamed.
Do I hit got it?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Nice.
All right, so we are live. Hey everyone, my name is Dylan Roth, also known as the Neo Hippie or Inverted World if you've been following my meme channel more recently. And I have a special guest today. I decided to do a first episode of this podcast with my dad, who I have to thank for being the one to introduce me into politics and conservative thinking. But it really goes back to a period in our lives where we really questioned reality, and it started to take on a natural evolution. And this is someone who really means a lot to me, and I think it'll be really fun for us to, talk on air and see what the state of our world is, and really like what we like to look at is the bigger picture. We talk a lot about politics, we get into the nitty-gritty issues, but there's a bigger picture that not a lot of people are talking about, that the media doesn't talk about, and even some of our favorite reporters in the alternative media don't really seem to cover or really even entertain these ideas. So we wanted to start this podcast as a way to put as a new lens for our current political issues and how it relates to something on a much wider scope, and how we can look at things from a 30,000 foot level and not just a 1,000 foot level. So if you'll please give a warm welcome to my dad, Matthew Roth, and I'm going to go ahead and bring you in right here. Hold on. Let's see. And why don't you go ahead and start your video? Hey there.
Hello.
Hey,
Hey.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So tell me a little bit about how you got started in politics and questioning reality. How did that start for you?
Boy, a lot of ways you can answer that question, but I think in terms of my political awakening, I would say it really started 2001 with 9/11. That was really very shocking, and it wasn't until then that I really started to question what was going on, because that just didn't seem real, and it didn't make sense to me. Like, I didn't understand how that could happen, and the explanation for it just didn't add up. It still took me a while to process it. I was busy, I was working, trying to make a living, and so a lot of the mundane aspects of life were prevalent, but that was the first point. And I would say it was probably about 4 years later, during one of the hurricanes, when I had nothing to do but read, and I was in Sarasota, and it was during Hurricane Wilma, and there was a local bookshop there in Felipe Creek, and I bought this book by David Icke, and I as I started to read it, I think it wasn't the one about 9/11, but it was other various subjects about reality and how fluid things were, and conspiracy theories that really made sense to me. And that, I think, is where it all just snapped, and I couldn't see the world the same way anymore. As you know, we have a mutual friend who, you and I, who we've spent many hours talking about alternative reality and how things are not as they seem. But I think it was that time in 2004 2005 where I started to question. But even then, I still um, was excited about Obama coming to office, and I was enthusiastic. I advocated for him, and I thought, oh, okay. And I was taken in by appearances and, his smooth delivery, and I thought, oh, well, here's someone different, because you know the first politician that I really liked was Bill Clinton. He was very smooth and charismatic, and he wasn't like George Bush Sr., who I just didn't connect to at all, and I just was kind of repulsed by. So these Democrats were more attractive to me. Clinton. I was willing to overlook his scandals, and I didn't really at the time know much else about him and all the darkness there. So after George W. Bush, which I didn't like at all, and I thought that whole election in Florida during 2000 was sketchy. I was excited about Obama, but that was really the point. Combine that with 9/11, and then the disappointment of the Obama administration. That the second term, I couldn't get behind him at all. At that point I was just apathetic. I was like, there's no point to investing any energy in this, because we're just going to be disappointed. But even then, I wasn't really diving into what American politics was all about and what drove it and what the issues were. That came later. Really, when I started to get into watching InfoWars and Alex Jones, and he was also aligned with David Icke to a certain extent. Not like he talked about Icke a lot, but they were, I think, friendly. And that was the first time I started to see politics discussed from a more conspiratorial and alternative angle, and also I realized that yeah, I was patriotic. I just America wasn't what I hoped it would be. But then, the kind of patriotism that I was hearing in InfoWars appealed to me. And it seemed genuine, and it seemed well researched, and I knew that Alex Jones was a showman, but I also felt like he was, for the most part, being very real with his audience, and something that we weren't getting from the mainstream media, which never felt real to me.
Mhm. Yeah, and at the time that I was living with you, I think when you were watching InfoWars, Alex Jones's support for Trump made you want to know more about it. And so how did you come to see Trump as this anti-establishment figure?
Well, I have to say that in the very beginning, I was only paying marginal attention to his campaign, because I thought it was a stunt, really. Sheree and I really liked watching his reality show, and I thought, oh wow, like he really. I know it was TV, but he came across to me as a smart person, someone who really understood business and was a good judge of character in insofar as the people that were on the show. Even Herschel Walker was on that show.
Right.
So I, like, I know that seems like a very superficial, like, introduction. So of course I had known of Trump before, dating back to the 80s. And he used to come on Howard Stern show, and they used to talk about, hot chicks and all that stuff. And it was all like dumb and ridiculous, but that's a lot of, what was going on in the 80s was like that, people were asleep, and I was asleep, and I was young, of course, but I think that was all part of the programming to make everything look just ridiculous, and politics to be unimportant, or something that well, I mean, you didn't even have the internet then, so you really didn't know what was going on.
Right.
But anyway, so, but once we started to get, past the primary stage, that's when I really started to pay attention. And when I listened to Trump's platform, I thought, oh, that I connected with it. I felt that, yeah, there is this problem with a globalist agenda, that has made America into an imperial player, an American empire that was good for the elite and not good for the average American. So, and Trump was actually talking about that, and I felt that Trump might actually be able to make some changes in the system that were needed. And even then, I still was skeptical that he could really win, because how could an outsider ever win an American election? Like any independence, it was always looked upon as if to even run as an independent was pointless, that you could never win. And yes, he was running as a Republican, but he was taking on the establishment. So how is that going to work? That somehow they would find a way that he wouldn't win. And I didn't expect him to.
Yeah. Yeah. And seeing that he was really against the globalists, I think that's what led you into writing your first book. So just so y'all know, my dad is the author of 2 books, Deploreville, Part 1 and 2. They're on Amazon. And the first book talks a lot about Trump's role as a nationalist against the globalists. And in his second book, he very cleverly juxtaposed New York Times headlines with Trump's tweets. So it's a book full of Trump's tweets and how what Trump was tweeting about, how it compares to what the New York Times was writing about. So you see his truth versus the disinformation or the propaganda with the New York Times. And I thought that was a really clever idea. So why don't you tell me a little bit about how you started the first book and then the second book?
Yeah, well, I'd been dabbling in writing for 20 years before that, working on little screenplays and treatments and making music videos and little commercial scripts and all that kind of thing. But I hadn't really found my medium. And honestly, so I started writing Deploreville in 2018. So it'd been 2 years into the Trump administration. So I got inspired. I thought, wow, this is a unique moment in American history. And I was consuming a lot of alternative media content, and it was bringing a lot of ideas for me. And I thought, well, this will be. Oh well, I started writing a blog with similar themes, and I thought, well, I can blog about these different stories, and I can transition the blog into a book. So the book became a series of essays on geopolitics, domestic politics, mostly Trump related, but everything that I felt was politically important during that time period.
Yeah.
And while I was doing it, I was doing some other work, and I had to use the New York Times as a resource. And I grew up with the New York Times. That was the paper of our house in River Edge in New Jersey. And we had it delivered every day. So I grew up reading that, and so I gave it a lot of authority in my younger years. And then as I got older, I started to see the propaganda angle more. And then, since Trump was at war with the mainstream media, I could really see the propaganda, like just how far they were willing to go and to lie and deceive and manipulate the public in order to fulfill their political agenda. So it just seemed, and the fact that so much of the juiciest ideas that we were getting from Trump was through Twitter, and I started to appreciate that medium. I thought it was a great way to condense your thoughts into a few lines, and Trump was really good at it. And a lot of what he was doing was trolling the media and trolling his political opponents. And at the time, it was the height of the Russia collusion scandal and the special counsel, and he often referred to it as a witch hunt. And the media was colluding with his political opponents, and that's why I came up with the name Trolling the Witch Hunt. And I thought that Trump versus the New York Times was a really there was a lot of content there to mine and to highlight the differences in the two sides of national populist versus globalist media oligarchy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just remember at the time that you were researching and putting all this together, I didn't know what to think because I wasn't very political. And, we were both talking a lot of conspiracy, things that we, would watch in the alternative media. And we agreed on a lot. But then when you started to research Trump and started supporting him, I'm like, how is he really different from any of these other puppet presidents? Like it really
Yeah.
didn't make any sense to me.
And I think that's a good question,
Yeah.
if you don't mind me interrupting for a second. Like that is really, when like us, we like to see things from a 30,000-foot view, it is harder to zoom in and say, well, okay, like, why would Trump be any different? Isn't he also part of the oligarchy in some way? Maybe he's just playing a role, like, so he's Pepsi and the establishment is Coke, and pretends to be different, but it's just so we can have the illusion of choice. And I think that is true to a certain extent. So like you have to be able to hold both of those at the same time. One is like Trump does serve a role at that level of Coke versus Pepsi, right? Because in the end, how much is really going to change, like, but on the other hand, the fact that he's been so attacked, by the deep state, by the media, the permanent political class, if he wasn't a threat, why attack him so hard, right? Why go to such great lengths? And really, even though he was impeached twice, he was never convicted. The accusations against him were never very substantial. Like
Right.
most other politicians do have like real skeletons in the closet that can be exposed, that are subject to blackmail. But really, no one's ever been more attacked than Trump. But really, there wasn't much to go after. I mean,
Right.
they've persisted, like they haven't, it's never stopped. But to get back to the point, like there was something different about Trump and something that the establishment did not like, that they felt, I believe, threatened by, like that Trump did represent an existential threat. And him, and more importantly, his supporters, the average Americans who did not like this American empire path that we were going down, this political system that really was not accountable to the people, that corruption was just getting worse and worse. You had these national level politicians that were becoming millionaires, that are becoming millionaires just by being in office, right? How does that? It's not supposed to work that way.
Exactly.
So I think Trump, even with all his faults, represented some genuine hope that there could be a change at the systemic level.
Yeah.
And I think we got a taste of it. We got a taste of it, but maybe it's like the Star Wars movies. So like, his first administration, winning the presidency, sneaking in somehow, like, and we could talk about that, like how that happened. But that was destroying the Death Star, but that wasn't destroying the empire. And we're in the second movie, I think, right now, with Empire Strikes Back, and they've struck back hard. They really, I feel like I got overconfident, that we were really making genuine changes, and that that we could deliver a more mortal blow to this plutocracy, but it's resilient, and it doesn't give up ever, so you have to destroy it utterly. And that has not been done. And we're unfortunately, we've been feeling the results since 2020, haven't we?
Yeah, I do want to talk a little bit more about Trump, especially as it, how we feel about him today versus how we supported him back in, when he was president. And, I was really, he made a lot of accomplishments, and, I think he did a lot of great things for the country. But then, there were certain things I was disappointed by, especially, as 2021 became so engulfed with mandates everywhere, all over the world, and in America, obviously, this is something that Biden allowed to happen. All these Democrat states allowed to happen. Mandates became, very political. There was a lot of political advantage in pushing that, and as a means of getting more people coerced into getting the jab. And I'll just say a little bit about when I got red pilled in 2018. I did a walkaway story. I talked about my background at Evergreen. So, I went to a Marxist training camp for college.
Yeah,
and I didn't really know it at the time. And, when I started to listen to Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson, and, getting, learning from more conservative think tanks, I was definitely evolving and waking up.
Can I just say something real quick?
Yeah.
Like I thought, just to show how far we've come in a short period of time, I didn't think there was anything wrong with you going to Evergreen
No.
at that time. That was what, 2016, 2015?
Yeah, 2015.
2015. So,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, yeah, it's a liberal, it had a reputation as a liberal arts school, but that didn't really trouble me. I knew that, we were open-minded explorers, and we were interested in the big picture. So I didn't see anything wrong with that, and yet now looking back on it, it's like, whoa, like, maybe I should have known at the time that would not be a great place for you. And I'm sorry if I didn't have that intuition or have that foresight, But yet it was still an important part of your journey, right?
Yeah.
The contrast.
We both didn't know any better. And like a school that I thought was really anti-establishment was actually supporting the establishment. It was actually like a testing ground for, the Marxist establishment of the education system, to see like what kids would be willing to do. Like, I noticed like Evergreen had like the most transgender students I've ever seen. I mean, and I'm sure there's a lot of those at other colleges, but they really normalized a lot of this, uh, radical leftist behavior. And, it's like very hippie-ish, very, everybody's like a free thinker or whatever, but no, everybody was actually part of a brainwashing program there. So,
That's why
it's
you're a
a very
neo-hippie.
typical tactic of the left to make people make their supporters think that they're fighting against the system or whatever, but they're actually directly supporting it. And there was a time when, more liberals were very anti-government, they were anti-war, and now they've become the party of pro-government, of pro-war. They've literally become exactly what they claim to be fighting against. And you can see that represented at college campuses, and Evergreen is probably among the most extreme example. But
You had
after
already
I
left when they had that where like you couldn't go to class if you were white, like all the white people had to like
yeah,
stay
so you
home.
couldn't you couldn't show up on campus if you're a white student without being, ostracized or, reprimanded in some way. Like I don't know if they really made it like a total requirement, but it was like a day without a white person day. And if you actually care about people of color and if you want to make a difference or whatever, you're not going to come to school. Like it's just ridiculous. So the professor Brett Weinstein, who spoke out against that, he got so much heat, he got fired. And this is a liberal professor who got really abused by by his own students.
Yeah.
And
And that happened. You had already left at that point, right?
yeah, I was already gone at that point, and I really wasn't awake until 2018, when I started to see through all the identity politics and, all these tactics that the left uses that I wasn't aware of. I didn't even really understand socialism. So then when I'm looking back on all this stuff that happened there, I'm like, geez, like how did it get this crazy? Like, why is Antifa on campus? And, why are they like preventing the professor, the superintendent from being able to use the bathroom? Or no, it was actually the president of the school. They weren't letting the president of the school leave the room to be able to go to the bathroom. So like, I'm like, so after I made my video about that, I started to connect with the larger community. And I was in New York at the time. Now I live in South Carolina, but while I was living in New York, I really wanted to connect with more of the the minority, really the minority of conservatives in New York, because being in a liberal city and then waking up and then realizing everybody around me is a bunch of sheep, following all this propaganda, how am I going to make friends? Who am I going to connect with? And
It was like a
so,
big city, evergreen city.
yeah, that's pretty much what it turned out to be. And so I'm so then slowly but surely, I met other Trump supporters, and as I was starting to support Trump and I started reading your book and starting to understand him a little bit more, thanks to you, I got on the Trump train. I would say thanks to you and thanks to the alternative media and getting past all the stuff that was censored. I woke up, and then I met people in the that were fighting against the mandates. So after COVID, and the whole world changed, I'm like, wow, okay, now we're going through a psyop. And then I started to connect with this community that was fighting against this psyop. So
Yeah, you
Yeah.
first you were more on the Republican, you were more involved with Republican groups, and then it became more, when the mandates hit you, it was more targeted towards the COVID mandates, right? So like the
Yeah.
the focus of the groups itself was different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and it definitely, there were, mostly conservatives in the group, but there were also liberals in the group. So, there were people that were, and also centrists. So, you know, more people were seeing how their freedom was being taken away. And it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat.
Yeah,
I think a lot of us, you know, again, mostly conservatives, but we're starting, there were also moderates that were starting to see through all the deception as well. So it was interesting, you know, seeing, a mix of people that, we were all working towards the same goal. But what I also noticed is that a lot of people in this group didn't support Trump because he was so pro-vaccine, and he got boosted, and he's promoting it during his speeches, and he's like urging people to get it. And it's definitely something that I very much dislike about what he did. I don't like it, but I'm also trying to see, like, okay, maybe he's playing politics. So what are your feelings about Trump's stance on the vaccine?
yeah, I never liked it, but like you said, he was playing this political game, and I don't think he want. I think that if he was weighing, whether to support vaccines versus not support vaccines, I don't think he wanted to be perceived as the person that didn't try to help the people through what was considered by the scientific establishment to be the the most expeditious path um, to curing people with COVID, right?
Yeah.
Um, to for a president to see it any other way, I think it was too risky to do anything else. But unfortunately, now he still has to promote this idea that he was a savior with these vaccines, that more and more reports just keep coming out about how much of a failure they've been, and how dangerous they are. And you know I mean, contrast that with someone like DeSantis, who isn't shy, it doesn't shy away from saying, hey, we thought the vaccines were good, and it appears we were wrong about that. And and people respect him for it. I don't know if it's Trump's ego or what, but the fact that he's not altering his position at this point, and I don't think anybody would, Trump supporters would not look down on him for saying, yeah, at the time I thought this was the way to go. So I, I, pushed Operation Warp Speed so we could get it to market as quick as possible. It was years quicker than people thought it could be done, and I was really proud of it. But it turns out that the vaccines weren't as good as I'd hoped. But I couldn't have known that. I had my scientific experts tell me this was the way to go, and these vaccines were safe and effective, and so on. I mean, I think you and I were skeptical, along with many others from the beginning, and questioned everything about what we were told about this virus, viruses in general, how illness could be transmitted, the fact that flu suddenly disappeared during COVID. And we understand the power of narrative and how that can be used to influence people, and you don't you don't need to have even a real virus to change people's behavior. You just have to have the threat of it and the ramifications of it in people's minds, and especially see everyone wearing masks and all this stuff. Like, it seems crazy not to believe it, right? So that's why, as people that didn't support the mainstream narrative about COVID, we took a lot of heat for it from family, from friends, from neighbors, and so on, right?
Yeah, and I mean I mean in New York, well, what I
And
went
you
through
especially did.
was, yeah, I mean, it wasn't just the mandates that were really strict, it was also people's at the, you know, the general population in New York, their attitude about it, and that if you didn't follow along with it, I mean, they really, you know, were very cruel to us, and we were called every name in the book, you know, like racist, white supremacists, and neo-Nazis and domestic terrorists, and you know, Karu's been called fat phobic, and you know, we've been spit on, and you know, so many, you know, I mean, so many different things, just because, you know, we're out there, you know, demanding our freedom
And exercising common sense.
our common sense. Yeah, exactly. And just because we don't want to put a cloth over our face, you know, we're killing grandmothers, or we're, you know, like we're these horrible, disgusting people that want people to die and all this. And I'm just amazed at like how cruel COVID really made these people in that cult to be. You know, that it's
Yeah, it was really bad. It was
yeah, like
really
the
bad.
mandates, I mean, not being able to go into restaurants and bars and all that, I mean, it was true discrimination and segregation. But I think what got me even more upset was seeing all the people just happily supporting it, all these liberals just happily go, you know, wanting it, and then wanting to ostracize and belittle anybody that didn't go along with it. And
Yeah, you know, they often claim that it was, oh, it's just because um, it's an act of empathy with others, you know, because we don't want to see others get sick. We don't want to infect others. But all too often, you know, I think there were some people that genuinely felt that way and were good-hearted and weren't trying to leverage it politically. But it was so politically leveraged from the very
yeah,
beginning. I mean, just the
yeah,
timing of it. You know, now people can say, "Oh no, I mean, how the timing of it? It wasn't planned." I have no doubt it was planned. It was planned to, you know, to drop just before the election season, and to change the whole structure of the election with mail-in ballots, and how much those could be manipulated. And you know, I mean, it changed American history. You know, I mean, no way Biden wins without COVID, right?
hmm yeah, absolutely.
And just how divided people became along political lines from that. But of course, there were plenty of Republicans who supported all the COVID measures. So, you know, but I think, you know, if you look at, you know, MAGA, nationalist, populist types, Tea Party types, you know, these were the people who were the most skeptical about the mainstream COVID narratives, and
hmm
have all been proven right, you know,
yeah,
at this stage of the game, right?
yeah. And the
Not to
the
gloat, but
yeah, and you know, like there's going to be, I mean, but I think that truth is going to come to light, and you know, Elon Musk is going to be dropping more Twitter files that are going to reveal more stuff that Fauci did, and you know, more evidence that could be used to prosecute and arrest Fauci. So, you know, we could start seeing some of that possibly. But what
I kind of doubt we'll see any arrests, you know, just because,
yeah,
you know, these people, they're all the worst criminals in the establishment are protected. You know,
yeah,
we saw it with Russiagate, and you know, I mean, it's a wake up call, right?
and
And we see
Epstein
with
and
the Clintons, the Epsteins, like, you know, unfortunately, they're protected. You know, no, I mean, hey, you never know. We could be wrong, but that just seems to be the way this evil system works.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we get a lot. I noticed it's like we get a lot of hope, and there's new stuff happening every day that definitely we makes us feel like we're winning. But I'm just hoping is that um is it sometimes too good to be true, and are we just putting our faith into politicians and people in these leadership positions to actually change things, and then we're not really doing enough to change ourselves, or at least maybe try to build some sort of alternative to this system, because that's where we can really make effective change. And even and even just doing things on the local level. We rail so much on social media, and we don't actually really do anything to get involved. Like I in the last midterms, I didn't even know anything about my local politicians here in South Carolina. And it's like, there is stuff that I can do, that people in our community can do, in our local communities, things that we can do to get involved. So we put so much faith in like the whole system itself changing, without looking at the little things that we can do. And this actually brings me into my next question. I mean, we saw evidence of the 2020 election being stolen. We saw it in the midterms in Arizona, and and now with the Twitter files coming out, it's real. We see that Twitter worked with the federal government to censor the opposition, to censor conservatives, and it did interfere in our elections. So and I think this is evidence that can be used in a court of law to be able to sue the old management of Twitter. I think it's a possibility. But my main question is, if we don't have free and fair elections in this country, is there any possibility of Trump actually winning in 2024?
Yeah, it's a good question. Trump aside for a moment, free and fair elections. The biggest determining factor in American politics, national politics, is money, right? Like as soon as you win an election, whether you're a congressman or a senator or president, you immediately have to start campaigning for the next election. And that means fundraising, right? So most of your time isn't spent focusing on what the people need. It's spent on how you can get reelected. And the people that are spending that money don't do it for free. They expect you to do what they need. And their needs, people that can spend that kind of money aren't the same as your needs, my needs, the average working American, right? Middle class America. So until we can take the money, the big donor money out of politics, I don't think any substantive change will really happen. So the rest is mainly theater, right? We have our favorite characters. Trump is one of our favorite characters, maybe someone like Ron DeSantis or Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Alex Jones, Roger Stone, or whoever, right? Whoever we like, that's in politics that seems to mirror our views, and that's all well and good. But effectively, what can they really do? This is why we're not seeing systemic change. And at the same time, the Democratic Party and the liberals, rhinos, GOP establishment, that's a big uniparty, right? And the Democrats have most of the institutional power. They run Hollywood, they run the media. Pretty much all of mainstream media. I mean, even something like Fox or your gatekeeping, allegedly right-wing media. It doesn't, they're not about any change. They're run by big donors, by military industrial complex, by big pharma, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know how we're going to see any real change under that system, but that's what gave us hope, right? When Trump was running, but at the same time, that's also what kind of crushed our dreams in a sense. And in a way, it's good because we were able to really experience the reality of the system, of this political establishment, and that has global ramifications. Right now, the U.S. is at a crossroads. Are we going to continue to be this singular unipolar hegemon, or are we going to transition into a multipolar world with different centers of power that support sovereignty throughout the globe, right?
Yeah.
So right now we're kind of in a new Cold War, a bipolar situation.
Right. And there's really no telling like where it's going to go. I mean, as long as there's, and I think that's what's interesting about it is not knowing. And I think it pushes us to really create what it is we want for ourselves,
Exactly.
and not, we can't just wait around and be dependent.
No.
And that's why I think that the whole, QAnon thing is really a psyop, because while it does kind of provide a good roadmap to, asking questions and I think that there's definitely some possibilities there, and I think they do a good job at telling these stories and what could happen. But at the end of the day, these are just theories. And if there was actually intel coming from the military saying that the president is going to do this, or I just think somebody would be killed for releasing that type of information. I just don't think,
Yeah.
and I just think, more than anything, I think it keeps people in a trap that, our government is actually going to do something, or the president is actually going to do, Trump might actually come back and do something. And that's, it gives people hope, but it's also there to pacify people and not really take action,
to capture them in this other narrative, like Trump's comeback, or get behind that narrative, or
it's a
and
counter
hey,
narrative.
if I'm given the option, between Trump and Biden, it's obvious we're going to choose, or Trump and some establishment candidate. Obviously, I still choose Trump, but it is problematic. But at the end of the day, what's the most radical thing you can do? What's the most influential thing you can do? And really, it's to continue to evolve as a human being, right? To love yourself, to love others, to have empathy, to have a spouse and start a family, be as independent as you can, love your family, raise them with strong values, right? And create your own little family empire, right? And the rest will take care of itself. Get involved in local community politics and ways to improve your local community and your home, and that's really it. The rest of the stuff, it's pretty easy to get bogged down in, and it's fun for us to keep on top of it and see what's going on. A lot of times it is a distraction. It's a time suck. Like I spend an inordinate amount of time on Twitter, and like I enjoy it, but it's also like for all the hours I put into Twitter, what could I be building, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like we really need it as a tool for our research. And I mean, so
Sure.
much of what's happening, I mean, it provides a lot of comedy gold. And that's why I started my channel, Inverted World, which is primarily a channel for memes. And I think memes are playing an important role in winning the culture war. Because my girlfriend Karu actually kind of put it in a perfect way, that the memes that we had are kind of like the laugh track to our reality. And
Yeah.
so you know, I noticed like so much of what we've seen in movies and shows, like, you know, a lot of that stuff actually reflects what's going on in our reality. And, you know, I take news clips and things of, you know, clips of just Biden or these Democrats acting crazy. And, you know, we're seeing the clown world for what it is. And that's why I started my meme channel, so that I could make fun of it and add movies and
Yeah.
clips and things to it to make it, you know, kind of provide comic relief to this, you know, very cruel and depressing world that we live in, because I think it's
Yeah.
very much needed.
And you're doing a great job of it. I'm really enjoying your videos, and they have a lot to say in a short space.
Yeah.
And they're funny. I mean, honestly, like in the two books that I wrote, the most fun I had with the books, the writing that I enjoyed the most was doing these, you know, short little fake quotes from famous people, and you know, little jokes and one-liners and that kind of thing, which Twitter is great for. It's
Yeah.
funny you should mention that, because like the last in the conclusion of Deplorable in the first book, I wrote, "And fiend, let's keep running our meme machines full blast. They're deadly to the system, good, clean fun, and great for the soul." You know, and
I remember that one, I think.
yeah,
Actually.
you remember
So,
that. So
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I didn't even remember having written that. I had to go back and look at it, and I was like, oh wow, you know, it's funny that, you know, that's exactly what you're doing now, and I applaud it, because it's fun. You know, you got to make it fun, and you know, as we've been analyzing, you know, you have to be able to like zoom in and zoom out, and one of the ways you zoom out is to make fun of it, and be lighthearted with it. And you know, the thing about humor is that it's never good humor if it's not close to the truth. So
Yeah.
humor reveals truth, and the most funny you can be is when something has truth in it, right?
Hmm.
So it's an important task.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's why, you know, as the saying goes, the left can't meme, because none of their humor is based in
Reflects
truth.
the truth. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. It's only when it does that it's effective and funny.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And while we're on the subject of Twitter, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the Twitter files. So, you know, why do you think all this stuff is coming out now? Like, what purpose do you think it serves, and what's motivating Elon Musk?
You know, just today when I really started to explore that question, I wonder if, whether it's intended or not, that Musk, with Trump kind of, you know, having been forced away from the main stage, right? We were in need of someone who could troll the system and troll this political establishment. And you know, because Trump was kicked off, you know, and he got outflanked, right? But Musk is pretty good at it.
Yeah.
He, you know, so maybe it could be, maybe he just saw an opportunity. Is like, I mean, it could be as simple as he's like, you know, this would just be so much fun, because no one's going to be able to troll the system like I can, and Trump can't do it. You know, why not me? you know, and
Yeah.
it's an important function. So I'd like to
Yeah.
think that's what it is. It's probably, you know, a lot a lot darker than that, or there's a lot more to it. But in some ways, maybe it's just as simple as that.
He's filling a hole, like he's
Yeah.
fulfilling that need for a troll right now.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, it's why
Yeah.
I think it's why we had Trump. And because Elon, is answers to his own handlers, like he's very connected to the establishment. I mean, the fact that he can get away with this, the fact that he can be such a, an overt troll and get away with, being now very outwardly conservative, like because he always claimed to be a centrist, but now liberals are going crazy because they see him now as a new Hitler, as the new fascist. So it's like the same story repeating itself, like with Trump, but now Elon is like the new Trump.
Yeah. Who
And
knows? Maybe he'll want to run for president, you know?
yeah, no, I
I don't
think
know. Like maybe, right?
it's very well possible. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I could see that in the future.
But yeah, definitely there was a vacuum for that person who could troll Trump and who could troll like Trump and
Yeah,
troll the media, troll the political establishment.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
someone with clout, and a billionaire. Now,
yeah.
I mean, how he made his money and his connections to the system and to the space program and all that. Like, I mean,
Mm.
there's a million questions with Elon Musk, right?
Oh,
But
absolutely.
but there were always a lot of questions with Trump too. Like, is he for real? And like
Mm.
why would he want to go to bat for the people? And is it just a posture or is it genuine? And I think people will ask the same questions about Musk.
Yeah,
So like
no,
it sounds like
no
we've
doubt.
already like written Trump off. I'm not writing Trump off, but I think that he needed to win in 2020 and he didn't, right? I mean, maybe he won and it was fixed, but either way, he did not get a second term, right? Let's just say that, right?
Mm.
Um, and he lost a lot of momentum because of that. He needed that momentum, and it would have been awesome to see what a Trump second term was gonna look like. I'm sure there would have been some disappointment, but I think he could have built on what he started. And I was shocked that he wasn't president, for that second term. And I'm skeptical that he could really make a comeback for 2020. I think he can win the primary, but unless you have the ground game, unless you are ruthless the way his political opponents and the establishment is ruthless with him, that I mean, they don't they don't follow any rules. I mean, it's a bare knuckles, death match, right?
Hmm.
And they're better at that, right? Like, I'm not saying we should concede, but I don't see Trump like surrounding himself with the kind of team, whether it be of lawyers and political killers, that's necessary to to really win that fight. I mean, that's why he wasn't able to prevail in 2020. I mean, maybe I mean, if he underestimated, then shame on him, because you can't underestimate the empire. You know, but he didn't get it done. Right? If they cheated, they cheated, but like, you got to play the game better, and he didn't play it well enough.
Yeah, and
You can leave it at that.
I was really disappointed that he, you know, while the election was being stolen, he kind of just walked away from it. He didn't really do much, to get the military involved, or to actually, he had executive power to stop it from being stolen. And he knew that it was going to happen earlier in 2020, and he really didn't do enough. So, I felt like he kind of abandoned his duty, to protect the nation.
I'm not sure at that point how much he really could have done. We could see that there's a pretty large woke contingent to the military. Like
Yeah.
it might not be that easy to do that. But the fact that he never really had great personnel, or at least personnel that he could retain when he was president.
Yeah.
To me, he feels like a one-man show, you know. And there's in the business world, whenever you see someone that has a business that's a one-man show, they always seem to hit like a ceiling that they can't go beyond, right?
Mhm.
Because to grow, you need help and you need good people. And I don't really see him having great people around him. And if anything, I think it's gotten worse since he's left office. So, yeah, they've been able to fundraise and all that, but if you're going to beat this Democrat machine, I mean, they can literally roll a corpse out like Biden and win, right? Or
Yeah.
like a Fetterman and win. And,
Right.
that's just like, that's trolling us, because we
Yeah.
still like, we go into it and we go, oh, look, that candidate's a joke. They're terrible. They can't win. And I mean, Oz wasn't a great candidate, but like Carrie Lake versus Katie Hobbs, I mean, that should have been Carrie Lake easily, right? But it's not the candidate, it's the machine, right?
Mhm.
So,
Right.
it's not Trump, it's his machine. And his machine just, it's not killer enough, at
Yeah.
least not yet. Yet, someone like DeSantis, who, you know, it's possible that he will make more deals with the establishment because he has to, like, because if you don't, you won't have enough machinery to get the job done. Now whether he, honors those promises or not, we'll see. But at the same time, I think someone like DeSantis might actually be better at creating that type of those type of alliances and machinery to win, right?
Yeah. I think you were saying to me the other day that it like DeSantis could handle the nation as president very well, like domestically in terms of domestic policy, but
Yeah.
foreign policy, it's a little questionable, especially like given there's like rumors he gets funding from the Bushes. I don't know if that's 100% true, but
Mhm. And
you know,
yeah, I mean, this is the dilemma, that
yeah,
these Republican candidates, it's if you want to be a populist, okay, great, but you won't get any money. You won't get any support, or
yeah,
very little, not enough to win. That's why it was so shocking that Trump won. But one of the reasons why he did have some of his own money that he could put in, from his business. He also had some big donor support. Um, and he was clearly he was underestimated, and the type of popular support that he got was underestimated by
mhm,
Clinton.
yeah,
And so like they
no
didn't
doubt.
cheat enough. They didn't game it, rig it enough, and take Trump seriously enough to overcome just how much popular support he had and still has,
Hmm. Hmm.
So when 2020 came along, and after, some of the beta testing that they did in the 2018 midterms, they were like, okay, and with COVID, it was like, okay, now we're not underestimating him. We've got the machinery in place. We can run out old Joe, and who won't even campaign and will win.
Hmm.
And that was just devastating, man. I mean, that was evil genius, and a real blow to Trump supporters like us.
Yeah. Yeah, and while we're still talking about Trump, I today the Twitter files that just dropped have evidence that Twitter knew that when they decided to ban Trump, that they were not, that there were no policies that Trump had actually violated. And
Right.
obviously we knew this before, but according to these discussions in their internal Slack channels, it reveals that there were Twitter employees that were there was a minority of Twitter employees that were against removing Trump because they felt like it was actually violating free speech. And there's actually an employee from China saying that because I'm from China, I can see how that this let me actually bring up the tweet. Let me show it right here. So this is a tweet from Barry Weiss as part of the Twitter threads. And so there were dissenters inside Twitter. And she says, maybe because I am from China, one of the employees said on January 7th, I deeply understand how censorship can destroy the public conversation. And someone responded, probably someone, anti-Trump or who knows exactly. I understand this fear, but I also think it's important to understand that censorship by a government is very different than censorship of the government. The First Amendment in the US and similar legislation in other countries with similar concepts exists specifically to prevent the government from silencing the people. And then this Chinese employee responds, I respect that, but realistically, we impose far stricter rules on effectively everyone else on the platform. So this is an employee admitting that what they did to Trump is so insignificant compared to the hundreds of thousands of accounts that they were purging following January 6th. This is another tweet.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's clear that a lot of people that have seen what's gone on in China and how hard the censorship is there, and how, if you even speak negatively about the government, you can be arrested. And they're tracking and tracing all of this. So people from China, they know how bad it is, and they don't want to see the same thing happen in America. And even people, I think even Chinese Americans on the left would agree with that. So these people that are working for Twitter that know how bad it is, but then they can't say anything publicly, but internally they're voicing their opinions. And I think it shows how like what incentive Elon had in like who he chose to fire. So he probably kept a lot of people like this employee who wanted to keep free speech. So it's almost an example of that. But
right, yeah.
And if we keep, I mean, like, honestly, like it gets even crazier, like as we go down. This was a staffer saying how let's see here, whoops. Another staffer agreed, don't see the incitement angle here. So I don't see the incitement of fear. What PC could it be trying to incite fear about? So there's
Which says a lot about the reality of January 6th, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what they tried to spin as Trump inciting violence, that he was telling protesters to go and storm the Capitol, it's all media manufactured, and people that were watching TV or just watching one source believe that. They never even actually looked at what he was posting on Twitter. And if you and then they said,
and the problem is the mainstream media isn't is barely reporting on these Twitter files, right?
No,
Like
they're not. No,
it's like for them,
they're
it's a
completely silent
non-story.
about this, just like they were silent about the Ghislaine Maxwell trial and all the information that came out of there.
Right.
This is, it's all, just another, another example. But this was another interesting tweet. I also am not seeing clear or coded incitement in the DJT, Donald J. Trump tweet, wrote Anika Navarrole, a Twitter policy official. I'll respond in the elections channel and say that our team has assessed and found no violations for the DJT one. So that's, that's pretty revealing. And she does just that. As an FYI, safety has assessed that the Donald Trump tweet above and determined that there is no violation of our policies at this time. And in these Slack channels, the head of trust policy and safety at the time, her name was Vija Gaddy. And
Yeah.
when this name came up, it reminded me of a video that Project Veritas released just after January 6th about how they were de-amplifying conservative voices. So they were actually admitting this in their internal Zoom conferences, that they were actively censoring conservatives and people involved in January 6th or any of that. And I was actually helping edit that video at the time. And I'll try to play it maybe a little bit towards the end. But this woman comes back and then actually tried to say that, Trump's tweets may not have incited violence, but it could be incitement to further violence. So she says in this thread right here, Vija Gaddy says, and this is at 9/11/01. So the gematria is just really, really funny right here. This is, I don't know, it's just, I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but anyway, thanks. But the biggest question is whether a tweet like the one this morning from Trump, which isn't a rule violation on its face, is being used as a coded incitement to further violence.
Yeah.
If you have any context or insight we should consider, I'm all ears. For example, the use of the term American patriots, and they will not be disrespected or treated unfairly in any form. So, she's trying to find some rationale behind, like, banning Trump for inciting further violence. And
Right.
this was also something, this was actually something kind of interesting too. I'm trying to find one. It was something about terrorists.
Like domestic terrorists.
Yeah. And here she's someone who's also saying, I don't know who the user is, but they say, big props to whoever in trust and safety is sitting there whack-a-moling these Trump accounts. So this is actually in reference to all the conservative accounts that were just purged from Twitter after January 6th, and they thought they had the justification.
And every time they would go before Congress, they would always say that, there was no shadow banning, like there wasn't any of this going on, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we knew that there was, but they would never admit it. So, like, you got to wonder if that's prosecutable,
Well, like, look, for example, like this was these are screenshots from, I think this was part 3 or part 4 of the Twitter files. Like for instance, this is what Dan Bongino's account looks like, for a Twitter moderator. And Dan Bongino was slapped with a search blacklist button
Right. So
here.
if you try to search for Dan Bongino, you can't find him.
Yeah, so he's late. So this is how they how they shadow ban. And like Charlie Kirk, he has something on there that says do not amplify. So this is how they de-amplified Twitter accounts. So
Right.
very interesting to see like what actually goes on behind the scenes. And I do want
The
to,
question is, the question is, did they do anything illegal? You know, it seems like they
yeah,
did, but I don't know,
right.
like, where's the actual illegality that you could prosecute people for? Maybe it's there, maybe it isn't. I'm not sure.
Well, one of our friends who is a lawyer, is actually, has been really interested in the Twitter files because she actually feels like there is evidence to be able to sue them. And I'm trying to,
Sue these employees,
yeah,
former Twitter
of
employees.
the former staff. I'm trying to find that right now. Yeah.
I'm also interested in it from the electoral interference standpoint, where during the 2020 election where they could, just do what you're saying here. They could amplify or de-amplify and shadow ban and, in order to promote the narrative that they wanted at the expense of the other party. I mean, it's all like the same stuff they were accusing the Russians of doing, which
yeah,
was, like $200,000 worth of Twitter ads, I mean, come on. Like, I mean, this was collusion of the intelligence community with big tech, right? And obviously it's not only in Twitter, it's in Facebook, it's in YouTube, right?
well, the
So,
fact that the FBI was getting directly involved in Twitter to, to actually
yeah,
for the censorship, it like that should be enough evidence, I feel like, to, um, you know, say that, it's the
well, that's
government.
that's literally that's electoral fraud, you know.
Yeah,
So when
exactly.
Trump was saying it's rigged, he was telling the truth. It was rigged.
Mhm.
You take out all the ballot harvesting and all kinds of illegal things that were going on with ballots. Just put that aside for a moment. If you just focused on electoral fraud,
Mhm.
that this collusion between the intelligence community and big tech and how they were promoting one side and um, trying to mute the other side, that's fraud.
Yeah, this was yeah, absolutely. And this was what my friend who's a lawyer in New York, what her take is. And she
Mhm.
says, I'm finding the Twitter files fascinating. When an officer of a publicly traded company publishes a false statement about the company and someone buys shares based on the statement, if they lose money, they can sue for fraud. Usually this takes the form of a class action, but I can't help thinking Elon bought a heck of a lot of shares based on many public statements that he has now shown to be knowingly false. I'm very curious if this is all building up to a massive lawsuit against the former officers and directors of Twitter for securities fraud.
Could very well be.
I
It's
think
a good point.
yeah. Um, and yeah, like I said, like I'm also not, you know, I don't know enough about how all this implicates them legally, but there's definitely something there. And if our government was involved, uh, then it is, it does have some standing in court. But will the system allow things to actually get to that place? That's the question. You know.
Yeah.
And is Elon really going to pursue that is the question. So
Well, they'll come after him as much as they
yeah,
can. That'll be the approach.
Yeah, that's the issue. Maybe at this point, it's like they don't, the powers that be, they just don't really care anymore about all their corruption being so out in the open. I mean, they've been so obvious about it lately that they don't really care if it's being revealed because they have the power to, you know, change the courts and do whatever they have to do to,
Well, and like we were just
stay out
saying,
and stay and they're very protected, like, so.
yeah, but well, like we were just saying, they control the media. So you and I are looking at these Twitter files and other people like us, and it seems like a bombshell, but when the mainstream media just ignores it, then, where does it go?
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's the power of controlling the mainstream media.
Yeah. 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 It's just
They amplify what they want to amplify, and they mute what they want to mute, whatever's in their interest.
right. Right.
And that's why, but that only proves the point even more, that that's exactly what they do with big tech. It's what they do with Twitter. It's what they do with YouTube, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So it
And
fits perfectly into their MO.
mhm.
How are we doing with time?
Well, we I think we've gone, we're close to an hour and a half now. So I mean, I definitely think we've definitely covered a lot, and I don't know, unless there's any other last comments or questions that you have for me, before we wrap it up.
Yeah, one question for you before we wrap up would be, what's one or two like of your biggest takeaways from life and politics in New York versus life and politics in South Carolina?
Yeah, well, what we experienced in New York, with the mandates and being, this minority, me being among the minority of conservatives in New York, it was very hard to be honest about your opinion. And even with people that you don't agree with, like, you can't even really have a conversation with anybody on the other side.
That's hard.
And, you're like, we were really politically persecuted there. And so, day to day, like, I would just be very silent and not confident enough in voicing what I believed. I mean, I think as things got more intense, I was very vocal, and being in a group among people that I felt safe and I confided in, and we could really, like, when you have a team to voice your opinion, that helps you feel stronger. Just being out there alone definitely wasn't helping. So, finding my community and us fighting, boots on the ground, that really made a difference. And but it was,
Yeah, and you grew a lot in that process. Like
yeah,
I remember, like, when you did that walkaway video, and then, your activism and your work with Veritas and the work you're doing now, and right up to doing this podcast, the difference in your knowledge and how you articulate and everything. It's like, it's night and day.
yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Yeah,
Proud of you.
thank you. That means a lot to hear that. And yeah, and you've given me a lot, to push me along that direction. So, and we've been a good team in trying to figure all this out too. So,
Well,
yeah.
I try not to push,
Well, you don't push. Well, you don't push me, but I get what I mean to say is you've inspired me a lot,
Oh,
and that's
thank
what
you.
means a lot. Yeah.
I'm glad. And you inspire me. It's mutual.
Yeah, definitely. And Yeah, so I mean, and then that's when I met Karu, while we were just coming out of lockdown in 2020. So, we met at a Trump supporters meetup group, and that's how it all started. Like Trump was kind of like our Cupid in a way. And
It's a good way to put it.
and she didn't even intend on going to any meetings after that, but I kind of kept pulling her back into doing the activism and going to Trump rallies and all that. And we've had a lot of adventure together, and as we've gotten to know each other and trusted each other more, we've done so much. And the funny story of why I'm actually now here in South Carolina, I mean, how it happened is definitely a story. I mean, I was still working at Project Veritas at the time, and I was doing some work in Atlanta. I was on a business trip. And when we decided when we had some time off, we took a road trip to Charleston. And initially, like, I didn't want to go. I had zero interest in visiting South Carolina. I'm like, what's in South Carolina? And
I didn't know that.
yeah, well, I mean, we actually
I didn't
thought
know
about
that
it,
you
like,
weren't interested at all.
well, I was just like, why are we gonna drive 5 hours to Charleston? I want to just get back to New York. Like, we can fly home. Like, why are we gonna do all this? And
Yeah.
it turns out that Karu has a friend in Charleston who's a real estate agent, and he actually they actually used to work at CBS together. So, she knew one person in Charleston and said, hey, like, I want to go and see more about, I've never been there and I want to see what the town is like. And, so I was resistant and stubborn at first, but then slowly but surely I agreed, and we took the trip, and I learned so much about the history. And I was really amazed, like, when we started walking around, I'm like, wow, this is a really beautiful, charming town with just so much history. I mean, it's one of the oldest cities in America, going back to the 16th century. And it really made me appreciate America more, because I could really learn something about America that I never looked into. And I think being a patriot, and just loving my country, I think it's an obligation to really learn history. And I said, like, why just visit when you can live in it every day? And as we've been living here now for the past 7 months, I've gotten to know the community, like, politically here is actually pretty, it's definitely a purple region. Like, I would say there's people with all sorts of political beliefs here, and a lot of liberals, but I would say definitely a good number of I would say Charleston's a very liberal town, but there's a great number of conservatives, and South Carolina being a very red state, it's really more of the norm around here to be Republican. So liberals are definitely a little bit more of the minority, occupying Charleston and Columbia. But, like, the rural regions of South Carolina are pretty much all red. I mean, and there's areas where they're flying Confederate flags and all this. So it's a very it's very interesting to get to know the South, because I never lived in the South before. And it's nice to be among more sane people and conservatives. But even when I talk to liberals here, I feel like I can actually have a conversation. We can disagree and still be friends, and still get work through those differences. So it's, Charleston should really be the model for more, open-minded people to live by. That you don't have to be on one side or the other.
Just like New York.
Yeah, I mean, and hey, like, there's definitely like that radical, like there's definitely like people who are radical and very woke down here,
Yeah.
but it's like, you can be yourself and not feel persecuted around here and not feel so discriminated against for your beliefs. So
Right.
that's what I really appreciate about being down here. So
I get it.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's been it's been really, it's been quite a journey, and I never thought I'd find myself here. So yeah,
Here we are.
yeah, yeah. But hey, I really want to thank you for coming on, and I really enjoyed, us, just kind of you know, letting our muses take over and just seeing where the conversation goes. I think it's been a lot of fun. And
Definitely. I've enjoyed it.
yes, and there's so much
Thank
for
you.
us to cover, and I think, if we do this next week, and I'd really like to, we can get into some more of the other current topics as well. So
Sure.
yeah,
I think that's a great idea. Let's do it.
great, great. All right, well, I think that does it for the bigger picture episode 1 today, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for coming on, Dad. Love you.
You got it, son. Anytime. Love you too.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye.